How did I take a tent in my back garden and build it into a multi-site glamping brand? So the Secret Garden Glamping all started in that first COVID lockdown, so April of 2020. I used to have a European transport business, so I spent half my time in France or Spain and half my time here. And I came back on like the 13th, 14th of March, something like that, fully expecting to go back, 10 days later, and we went into lockdown. So I got stuck here with my two young children, Noah and Sophia. And if you remember in that first lockdown, it was beautiful weather every day. We had a camping trip in the garden. So we set up this little 2-man tent, and half the poles were missing, the pegs weren't there, but we set it up on the grass, had a little camping trip, and the kids loved it. And they had a great time, although waking up on the wet grass in the morning wasn't very exciting for them. So I decided to build a deck to camp on the next day. So I built that deck, we pitched up the tent on there, and then as days turned into weeks and then into months, I just kept building a bit more each day in the garden with the kids, taking photos of what we were doing, showing them how to put stuff together. And throughout that lockdown, I basically moved my whole living room into the garden. I had the TV out there, the sofa, everything else. By the end of that first lockdown, I'd created this whole kind of space in the garden, which I now know to be, a glamping pod. And it was never anything or any other intention to do anything with it except for, have fun with the kids. And a friend of a friend of a friend worked for Unilad and said, can we do a story about it? So I was like, yeah, no worries. In that first lockdown, when everybody was building home bars and gyms and that sort of stuff, I'd created this whole glamping pod. So they did this story, and it's a photo of me and my son and my daughter sat in front of this pod, and it was what a dad had built in lockdown for his kids. And it got good traction, but then the next day they're owned by Lightbulb. So Lightbulb posted it and it went viral. It got 10 million views. Because my name's quite unusual, people started messaging me on Facebook at the time, asking if they could book it for a holiday. And I thought, well, why do you want to come and stay in my garden in Skem on holiday? It seemed like a ridiculous idea. And I kind of put it to the back of my head for a little bit. But the honest answer is I was on, at that point, in that first lockdown, if you remember, there was no support for anybody who was self-employed. That kind of came in on lockdown number 2 and 3 and that sort of stuff. So I had no money. I'd taken the mortgage payment breaks and signed on to Universal Credit. And I had no idea when I was getting back to work. So I thought, do you know what, stuff it. And I remember sitting there at the desk one night and I signed up to Airbnb. I had 6 photos of it, did a little listing of it, put it online, went to bed, thought nothing of it. Woke up the next morning to 140 bookings. And I was genuinely blown away. I was like, oh my God. By day 3, we were fully booked for 2.5 years in advance. And it was crazy. It had gone viral, and then Airbnb had put it on their homepage. It just went ballistic. From there, I thought, well, wow, I've got to run it as a business. But it was always going to be a little side hustle. I never intended on opening a glamping site, let alone a chain of glamping sites now. It was always just going to be a little side hustle. And I did go back to work. I went back to work in the sort of summer, I think it was July, August time. And then we went into lockdown again in the sort of September, October, came out of lockdown, went back to work. And then in the December, we had Brexit. So although, if you remember back on that 31st of December into the start of January, nobody knew how to cross the borders, none of the paperwork was in place, it was an absolute nightmare, there was queues at the ports and everything. So again, I ended up back at home, and I run it as a little business, just me welcoming guests. That was in the January, February of 2021, and I loved it. I got to spend, every day at home. I got to pick the kids up from school, I got to go and watch my son's football matches, that sort of stuff, and I loved it. And I thought, do you know what, if I can just do a little bit more, then I can just do that as a living. So it was on the back of a fag packet type scenario. I worked out if I could have 3, if I got 3 running, that'd be enough to generate a revenue and just have it as a business. Speaking with my planning consultant, they said there was always going to be negotiation. So she recommended to apply for 10. I never wanted 10. I wanted 3, and in the end we got 6. And I thought, that's ace. I want 3, we've got 6, I'm never going to use that. But then that's where the whole journey started then.